Okay, and we are live. Welcome everyone to ACD 164. We have the folks from the execution specs repo that wanted to give a quick presentation on the new testing framework today. They had to hop off, so we'll start with that. Try to time box it at around 10 minutes, and then we can do some question and conversations about it at the end if we need more time. And then after that, we'll discuss a bunch of the Cancun stuff and finally the ERC's EIP's repo split at the end. But yes, Dan, you're the one leading this, right?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah. Can you see my screen already?
Yep, we can. So yeah, go for it.
Okay, perfect. Hello everyone. Yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity for us to show the new execution spec test repo. So I'm Dan. I joined the EF testing team just in April, a couple of months ago, working alongside Spencer and Mario and Dimitri, who are going to help me with this presentation. So the testing team, just before we jump to the repo, I mean, just to broaden the scope a little bit, our aims are really to ensure that client implementations for features for upcoming protocol upgrades, they meet spec, and sometimes the spec can be a little bit difficult to interpret, or maybe not so clear when you actually come to implement it. So we also try and provide really a source of truth for client implementations for teams to meet. And just more generally, though, we'd really like to help the entire ecosystem improve the development cycle. So we really want to help all the client teams have a faster cycle for their work. So I just started in April and Spencer started in January, so we have a bit more capacity, and we'd love for you to get in touch and give us ideas, feedback, let us know how we can help you, and if it's in the scope that we can scale it in our relatively small team, then we're happy to do it. Okay, moving on to the repo. So just a quick background. I mean, it's a framework and a library that enable the implementation of test cases for execution clients in Python as source code. And LightClient started the initial development at the end of 2021, just to explore a different approach to writing test cases for clients. And then it didn't receive initial huge adoption, but after discussions in DevCon, people liked the idea a lot, and test case development started in earnest late last year. And the focus being on new tests for Shanghai, so for the upcoming release. And now we think it's a good time to show you the stuff because there's been a lot of 4844 test coverage added to this framework or to this repo. And there's been a lot of framework improvements and some new online doc generated, which makes it helpful and good to use. All right. So most people here will be familiar with Ethereum tests. So what's different about this approach with this repository? So Ethereum tests, the tests are implemented as YAML, and here the test cases are implemented as Python code. The other difference is the repo itself contains the tooling or the libraries and the framework to generate fixtures using transition tools. And this helps avoid a two-step approach that's used in Ethereum tests, where some YAML spec gets checked in, which is perhaps generated from some source code, which is often not available. And then from the YAML spec, JSON fixtures are generated generally from, I think it's retest ETH. So why do we like this approach? And I mean, basically the main reason is we have test cases as code. I mean, from this, we have readability. Due to the structuring of the repository, we have a single step to generate JSON fixtures to test clients against. As code, the test cases are easily parameterizable with a few lines of code. The test cases and framework are versioned together, which means you'll never have any clash between different versions. It should just work. The code is easy to modify. The documentation is in line with the source code, so you can generate beautiful documentation from the test cases. And all this makes it a lot of fun to implement tests with. You can drop into a debugger, check the state of your test, and so on. So we're focused on the big long box in the middle there, execution spec test. So on the right, you have a command line using the framework fill, and we fill tests, and the test cases are here on the left in the test directory. And these use external tooling, the EVM binary from Geth currently. So a quick comment about that is that the transition tool from EVM1 should soon be integrated. And we'd really love, like all client teams, to have a transition tool available, and we'd be very happy to integrate it in this framework if it is. Yeah, so using this stuff, we also use Sol-C just to compile some Mule. And based on this, we generate output, which are fixtures, JSON files, which then can be consumed by the test cases and consumed by clients in Hive or via client executables directly. So now we're going to have a quick look at more detail to the test cases themselves. So I'll hand over to Spencer for an explanation of what kind of tests we have.
Thanks, Dan. Those familiar with Ethereum tests will know that we have two test types, state tests and blockchain tests. To summarize them quickly, state tests are designed to verify the behavior of a single transaction or operation within a block, whereas blockchain tests focus on the effects that occur from the block-to-block interaction in the Ethereum state. It's worth highlighting that thanks to Mario, we now also have fork transition tests. And these are a branch of blockchain tests where, for example, block 1 and block 2 could be in Shanghai, and block 3 in Cancun, highlighting the transition there. So all of the test cases so far have auto-generated documentation, many thanks to Dan, which we're showing off here. This example here is probably one of the most basic state test cases that exists, which simply verifies 1 plus 2, but it helps us paint the picture a little clearer. So at the top of the test case, we specify from what fork the test is valid from. So here we've specified Homestead. This enables the test to be filled multiple times for each fork from and including Homestead. We have the pre-state, where the first account holds some Mule-compiled bytecode for a simple S-store of the add operation, a transaction from the test address to the first account, which executes the Mule, and then the expected post-state with the result of the add operation in storage. So yep, 1 plus 2 equals 3. Now at the top of the page, we have this command line. The Python code here can be filled using this command at the top into the client consumable JSON file. Okay, so this is a simple single test case. What if we wanted to expand on this? And for example, easily specify different parameters for the add operation or even change the opcode we're using? Well, with the new framework, we can use PyTest parameterization. So this test here is for point evaluation precompiles, specifically for invalid blocks. And we have a bunch of cases here. So this test case is marked valid from Cancun. And as before, if we scroll down to the bottom a little bit of the test, we have the pre and the post state and an individual transaction. But instead of these being defined inside the test function, they're defined outside the test function as a global PyTest fixture. Now, these allow us to use them within other test functions, where the values input into the test functions are entirely dependent on the parameterization of the test. So here we can see we're parameterizing by the specific point evaluation vectors. And the main idea I want to get across here is how easy it is to add another test vector. So for this case, if anyone here can think of other examples for an invalid precompile call, all you essentially have to do is add to the list of parameters and specify a descriptive test ID that describes the new test case added. So yeah, super simple. And if anyone is interested, please feel free to contribute. If you want to know more about the specifics of each test from the docs, you can look into the Git source from the link at the top of each doc page. So thanks, and yeah, I'll pass you over to Mario.
Thanks, Spencer. So yeah, over the course of the last couple of months, we've been using this this repo extensively to test the 4844's EIP and basically the EVM changes to the 4844. So that comprises the block types of types transactions, which is the minimal version, not the network version, the block hash opcode, the new block headers, which are the excess data gas and data gas use fields, and also the precompiled point evaluation that was already highlighted in the example before. So I really want to highlight a great practical example of the efficiency of parameterization in the EVM tests. And this is a recent spec change in 4844, which is the value of its maximum blocks per block count. So originally in the 4844 spec, the maximum number of blocks was 4, and was just recently, it was updated to 6. And with test parameterization, we were able to simply update one single line of test code, and the test cases for all new combinations were automatically generated for us. Granted, we did need to prepare extra parameterization code beforehand to account for a change like this. And also, this type of change at this moment is manual, since we currently, from the Python test code, we do not parse directly from the spec document, but yet this was definitely made the process much quicker at the time of the change. And it's also worth mentioning that we can do this, perform this change over and over again. We can just change it back to 4 or change it up to 8 or whatever the spec defines. And here on your left, you can see the original number of test cases with maximum of 4 blocks, and on the right you can see the new test cases. So a great thing about the new documentation is that you can go inside the doc and see exactly what we have implemented and exactly all the number of test cases. So in this case, we have the block transaction test cases. As you can see, every single test case that was developed, and you can go and just look at each individual test case and just if there is any coverage missing, or if there is a particular test idea that you feel that is not tested by this, you can definitely, we are open to feedback, and we can obviously add more test cases as needed. And just to finalize, here we have both the links to the repo and the link to the documentation preview. So please feel free to access these links. And as I already mentioned, all the test cases that are currently implemented, you can see them in this doc preview. It's very cool. And if there's any coverage missing, just please feel free to reach out, and we will make sure that we include more test cases. So I think that's it from us. Are there any questions from anyone?
Ruben?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, will there be any pre-generated JSON files hosted? Because I noticed there is a Shanghai JSON files are now in Ethereum test repo, right?
Yes, definitely. So definitely, the current release that we were following, it's up to change but basically every release we package all the generated JSON fixtures, and we package them in a tar file, and we upload that next to the release. We have two kinds of releases, which is the currently mainnet version. So we have all the tests for the mainnet, for what's in mainnet now, and we have the upcoming fork release. So right now we only have 4844, but we plan to include all the APIs for Cancun. So we will have a Cancun release, which will contain all these files. As for when the release is coming, we are planning to release very soon. And we are finishing up the change to the framework. So when this is done, we will release the new framework, and we also will release all the pre-generated fixtures for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Dimitri, the former retested developer, and it's really cool to see what you guys are doing with the Hive tests, and I think it's really cool, especially the parameterization part. But what I also want to say, I would like to deliver the message to client developers to implement the transition tool protocol that we are using to generate the test. This is transition tools used both in Python and currently in retested, which is still maintained, and generate all the tests in Ethereum test repo. And as many clients implement transition tool, we would be able to run the test and generate the tests using Python, for instance, and see all this new implementation and new EIPs because of transition tool implementation from a client dev. So I really encourage client devs to do that. It's not so difficult, and yeah, would like to see more teams joining the club.
Comment?
Thanks. Any final questions, comments?
Yes, I have one comment.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Martin Sander here. Just a comment to what Dimitri said. So at least in the case of Geth, the T8N implementation does not correspond to Geth execution. The T8N is written to be correct, and it's written to be used as a backend tool for generating tests, but it's not as reliable as a test executor and test runner as the execution of state tests. So I don't think it should be used to test like Geth compliance. You should not use T8N for that. You should use the Geth state test runner. That's it. It might be the same for other clients. I don't know.
Got it.
Yep, I agree, but in general, it is very nice if everyone implemented this, because then we could start implementing new tests in new EIPs in other clients. Right now, it's basically only really possible in Geth and maybe BISO to implement a new feature and fill these fixtures. So if other clients also implement the T8N tool, would be really nice so we can like researchers can prototype in their favorite language and don't always need to rely on Geth to do it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions about execution tests?
My phone crashed at one point, so maybe I missed it. But is there the ability to fill with eels?
They're working on it, as far as I know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think there's T8N support, and as long as they have that, we can definitely use them to fill.
Yeah, I mean, as most of you know, on the consensus layer, we write kind of the Python specs and simultaneously get to do testing and filling out of that. There are certainly drawbacks, but it allows for pretty rapid generation of test vectors along with the spec building.
Definitely, I think a deeper integration is definitely possible, and it's something that we should definitely discuss. It would definitely, for example, right now we depend on manual updates, as I mentioned, for 4844, because once the spec is available, we have to manually go inside and change maybe one or two parameters for the test to be up to spec. But yeah, ideally it should be automatic. If we update the ELSE spec, we should also somehow consume this update in the execution spec test, and also automatically update the tests. Definitely.
The other thing is I'd love to talk to you all about the consensus spec test. Just, I think they could use some love, they could use some documentation. I'm sure there's a lot of things we could clean up. So maybe worth chatting soon.
Definitely. Dan is the mastermind behind the documentation right now. He was the one that put up all the Python scripting that was necessary to automatically generate. From the doc strings of each test case, we basically just grab that and then just automatically generate the documentation. Yeah.
Very cool. I'll still write the test, I promise. I just want some help to make them pretty.
Cool. Anything else? Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot for the presentation, guys. And yeah, people can reach you on the R&D Discord to provide feedback or ask questions. Okay. Next up, we have a bunch of Cancun updates. So first, just a small change to the 4844 precompile address. Alex opened the PR. I don't know if there's any context you want to add, but seems pretty straightforward.
Hey, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just looking at precompiles for 4788. And I just noticed that basically 4844 was not tightly packed in the sense of just, having the one right after the current last precompile we've added on mainnet. And this this PR just suggests putting it there.
I guess, does anyone disagree with that? And if not, we can have this for the next DevNet, DevNet 7.
Just as a background, it was like the gap is because of the BLS precompiles, but I agree we should tightly pack them, and the BLS precompiles are not going to be on mainnet this fork, so looks good to me.
So we probably should simultaneously adjust the BLS precompile EIP just so that we don't have conflict if there's testing on that.
Yes. Alex, I guess
I don't know who's going to do it other than me, and I'm not sure that 2537 is exactly what will even go to mainnet eventually. So I'm not super inclined to go edit it, but
you could even add it at +8 or something. Just get it out of the conflicting zone, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so perfect. Let's make the change on 444 and then reflect it in the BLS EIP as well to not have a conflict there. And then Alex, your second PR on 4788, you want to give some context on this one?
Yeah, this one is much more involved than the one we just discussed. So we had discussed 4788 as a very quick, brief reminder. This is taking the beacon block root, which is a cryptographic accumulator, so you can make proofs about consensus state, taking this root and putting it into the VM. It unlocks a lot of cool applications. You can go to the EIP to see a little bit more about that. And we've had a little back and forth on exactly how to implement this, what the API looks like. Ultimately, there's a precompile that will expose these roots. And the one thing was essentially what does the API of this precompile look like? Just going off of the data the EL has, they have a timestamp and this root really handy. So the question becomes, okay, do we key the essentially API to the precompile by the timestamp, by the root? How does this work? And there's some different options here. One option is just to write by timestamp, but there's not a nice way to basically then bound how much storage this thing uses, which generally is nice. We don't want this unbounded thing growing forever. So 5-10 years from now, you look at this precompile storage and it's gigabytes, something like that. So anyway, point being, I made a pass on changing how these things are stored so that the storage is bounded. There's only a certain number that will ever be in the precompiled storage. And yeah, the only thing that's a little funny is basically there's 2 ring buffers, simply because if we only had 1 ring buffer, so if we have a ring buffer, then we can bound the storage, because basically for every timestamp, there's like 1 sort of slot it goes into. The issue there is that if we have a missed slot on the CL, or just in the chain broadly, then what's going to happen is you basically have like a prior write that would then basically correspond to a later timestamp. And this could theoretically be used to, like, you know, attack some DApp, let's say, that's like using this. So that's no good. And the way you get around this is just basically record both the timestamp and the root. And one more caveat from there is just because, you know, the storage size of these things is only 32 bytes and the roots are 32 bytes. I can like tightly pack them into 1 storage slot in the state. And so now there's like 2 ring buffers. So if you look at this, there's like quite some change, but it's mainly just this complexity around juggling these 2 ring buffers into the EVM storage. But otherwise, it should be pretty clear. And yeah, I think at this point, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions if something wasn't clear, but yeah, please take a look. I think this is essentially the best option just based on all the constraints that people have voiced. And yeah, if this looks good, we'll merge it, and this EIP will pretty much be settled for Cancun.
Thanks. Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny approach when you first look at it, but I do agree that given the constraints that it is actually a really solid solution. I guess the other design option could be like, instead of 2 ring buffers, have ring buffer where it's, you know, in and plus, or you stagger them rather than having them as total separate, but this is totally fine. I like it.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, so yeah, if folks want to review that, and then assuming there's no issues, we can get it merged the next couple days. Okay, next up, Powell just wanted to share, I don't think he's on the call, I don't think he can make it, but there's the mcopy tests that have been merged, so I'll put the PR here, but if clients want to test against that, and I see already BaseU and Ethereum JS say that they pass the tests there. I don't know if anyone else had thoughts, comments on that. Okay, and then if not, Mikhail, you had a PR for the Cancun engine API spec. Do you want to give some quick context on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there is a PR open with the Cancun specification, and there is the aim is to get it merged like next Monday. So this is kind of last call. Yeah, and what's in this specification? Basically, the main thing is blob extension specification that everyone is familiar with. The other one is like exchange transition configuration deprecation notice. And the most recent thing that was added is the payload attributes version 3 and the fork choice updated version 3. This is to accommodate the parent beacon block root and make it into the payload build process, because we need parent beacon block root because of the IP that because of the 4788. So that's basically it, and more eyes on it would be great. So if you have a look before Monday, that'd be great. Also, yeah, really appreciate more approvals on that PR. Any questions related to the Cancun spec of the engine API?
Did the 4788 changes make it in there, or are they still think?
Yeah, they are there. So.
All right, cool.
Might be a stupid question, but how do we get this timestamp for the parent beacon block? Can we just take the parent execution
Is
layer
this a
block?
4788 question?
Yes.
Well, so you don't. Like, you just have the header. The header has the timestamp, and there's a root, and that's all you need to know.
So we use the parent block.
So it's the current timestamp mapping to the prev, and the caller
okay.
the caller needs to map those things together.
I see. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I don't know if it should be Cancun, by the way, because we had Paris and Shanghai before. Yeah, but open to rename it to Cancun if people are okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to retroactively rename the other ones, but it seems like given both sides use it, probably makes more sense. But if there's anything that depends on it, it's also not a big deal.
Yeah. If we will keep having these kind of like combined names for a fork, then it probably makes sense. Yeah, and the EL is the server. Yes, that's why it is named as it is. So by the fork that is on EL side. So I'd leave it.
Okay, and did you want to talk about the deprecation a bit more? I know you had your doc
yeah,
that you shared.
Yeah, sure. So here is the doc. Yeah, so to deprecate exchange transition configuration gracefully, we should have a procedure of doing that, because if we just drop, the support of these methods in uncoordinated fashion, then users might see big red messages in their logs that this method either not being called for some period of time, or it's not exist on the EL side when CL calls it. So I've made this document, and the procedure looks like really a simple thing. So the first step would be EL clients just stop logging an error message that if this method hasn't been called for some period of time, for any period of time. And then all EL clients should cut a release on that with this change in the release. After that, CL clients removing this method or just stop calling it, or entirely removing it from the code base, and make a release as well. And this release should be either denub or earlier. And after Cancun happens, EL clients are free to remove it as well. So why is this why this so complicated? At the first glance, it's not complicated if you take more, a deeper look into that. This is because we should first break the dependency between CL and DL on making these calls, and then we can remove this method. So this document, has the procedure description, and also has tables with the status of development. So this is how it can be done. Alternatively, we can do it in a highly coordinated fashion and say that EL client remove this method support, and CL client do the same, but these changes all come in only into the nub release. So strictly into the last release before the fork, which I don't see as a comfortable solution for everyone, but maybe people have different opinions on that. And whatever we choose, I think that would be great to discuss it here with the client developers and have their agreement on doing this deprecation and doing it in the exact way as we come to. So any questions or suggestions?
Just a quick thing from us. We already removed this like a long time ago, and no one really complained.
So the message, you mean, right?
Yes, we only give a message if we don't receive any updates from the beacon client. So like if the beacon client doesn't call any method. So.
And we are working exactly in the same way. If we don't get any fork choice, any new payloads, then we print warning.
Cool. And to clarify, Marius, you have removed the message, right? But the method handler exists, and if CL calls it, it will get a response.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, same for Bazu. Oh, that's great, basically. Okay. If there is no opposition, so I would say that this is the way we do it. Like remove it from EL first, and yeah. Can you guys mark just make a green checkbox on the clients that have already removed the error message? I mean, like in this document would be really useful. So any other EL client developers want to chime in on that?
In Aragon, we've never printed an error message, so it's already implemented.
It's so great. So we have Bazu, Aragon, Geth, Nethermind, and Ethereum GS is one that left, right? If it
yeah, okay. So basically we can just move this to the CL side at this point. And maybe,
that's great. Okay, so let's discuss it on the CL call next week then.
Cool.
Thank you.
Of course. Sweet. Okay, so next up, I guess I want to do some space if there's any Devnet updates that people wanted to talk about on this. Yeah. Anyone want to give us a overview of where things are at?
Yeah, I can give a current status. So we had Devnet 6 relaunched on Friday, and where we went through a couple of issues. It's finalizing again, but just with a minor subset of clients. So I think the approach we're going to take is wait for clients to have more stable releases and relaunch it cleanly with Devnet 7. I can also incorporate the PR that Alex brought up earlier today, and then make a spec list and share it on the interop channel. And maybe one of the client teams can talk about the issues we saw.
So I can talk about the Geth issues. Basically, there were a bunch of them. Kind of completely rewrote a lot of the code. So yeah, basically the Devnet is kind of not really indicative of our current code anymore. But the current code should be way better. One thing that that kind of led to problems was that we didn't really distinguish between the network, or correctly distinguish between the network form and the normal transaction format. And so there were blocks mined with the transaction in the network format in it. So basically, like the block contained the blobs, which is wrong. And
did Geth, even though Geth created, did Geth reject such blocks or accept them?
I'm not. It was kind of all over the place. I'm pretty sure some clients accepted them. So there was a lot of forking going on at some point.
I see. All right. I mean, it's just when I hear this kind of stuff, I'm like, can we catch it earlier in the pipeline? Obviously, block production is kind of a weird one, but the acceptance of those should certainly be in, or rejection of those should certainly be in tests.
Yeah, the problem was that like a lot of clients didn't really work 100%, and so like there was a lot of things going on, and it wasn't like, okay, only the Geth nodes forked off now, but it was more like the whole network is kind of destroyed. Now,
yeah, and we were kind of relying on Ethereum JS to be like the stable boot nodes, but when we started the transaction fuzzer, we then had issues with Ethereum JS as well. So there were kind of like no stable nodes on the network.
Yeah. So now it's very clear that this cannot happen anymore on Geth. So, but yeah, it's something that I would really like to test out on another DevNet and create tests for that. Yes, that's it from my side.
So the question in the chat, it seems very clear DevNet 7 should be 484 only.
Yeah. Yeah. Does any other client want to share their experience or?
Yeah, just briefly, the basic challenges mostly revolved around RPC interaction and some formatting challenges that we had between the CLs and us. There was just a couple of ambiguities. I don't remember anything specific, but they were fairly quickly deduced and straightened out. So
nice.
That's all.
Could then Hive tests?
So continue, please.
Yes, this can be tested by Hive tests.
Do you mean the block with the network type tree transaction, right?
Yes.
Definitely. We can. I think we can add that in the execution spec test, and we can consume that in Hive, and we should be having a test for that before the next deadline.
I would advise to check additionally not just payloads, but get block by number like that, because it's way some sleeves that plans like synchronized, and probably it could be a source of such broken phone transaction. And as for potential start of Devnet 7, it would be cool probably to make it not in a regular way, but start it partially to find who causes this forms that network form transactions to appear on network, because I still think it's not we are not sure that it is produced by some certain client or it is fixed at all, and it may appear on the Net 7 as the same issue again.
Your mic wasn't great, but I think I made out most of that. Any other? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Do you want to add something, Alexei?
Yeah, just.
Oh, your mic is better now.
Rephrase, yeah, quickly. So the idea is to confirm that issue is disappeared actually, because now we're not sure. Will not break next Devnet 2.
So you're not sure about? Sorry. Yeah, your mic sort of broke up. You're not sure about what exactly?
That this broken form of transaction network form will not propagate in Devnet 7 again. We are not still sure that the source. What is the source of this broken transactions? Which client sent them?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm quite sure that it was Geth, but yeah, we just saw too much weirdness going on for, I think, for only Geth to be the issue. So either other clients accepted those transactions, or it was the other way around, that they accepted transactions without blobs, like blob transactions without blobs or something. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we will break another Devnet 7, but that's fine.
Okay, but let it be another way, because I'm exhausted by this issue.
Okay, so yeah, I guess DevNet 7, we want to restart as a 4844 only DevNet, and potentially just add this small change for the pre-compile address, or do we even not want to do that and simply focus on like restarting things as they are and dealing with the address change after?
I think we should deal with the address change when we implement all of the Cancun APs.
Okay, so basically keep the same specs as for DevNet 6, just try to restart it and have it run cleanly.
Yeah. So what's really cool is the Mario created Hive Test for 4844. So one thing that would be really nice is if every client could make sure that they are passing those Hive tests. We are missing one right now. That's the transaction propagation one. So transaction propagation is still broken a bit. But yeah, so I would give the DevNet another week or something for everyone to double check with Hive that they are passing everything, that we don't see these issues on the DevNet for the first time.
I added the link to the PR for this Hive test. If you need help and anyone needs help running, just let me know.
Gajinder?
Yeah, I can update a little bit about Ethereum JS as well as Loadstar.
Yeah.
So Ethereum JS had an issue where we were not calculating the data gas used correctly. So that was, however, resolved early on. But post that, there were no issues in Ethereum JS apart from the fact that Ethereum JS cannot really handle the transaction load. So when the team started fuzzing and put load on it, Ethereum JS was not able to cope up. So that was primarily the issue with Ethereum JS. So I think next time when we basically fill the network with heavy blocks, we should make sure that the other EL clients can basically support the network before doing this. And the second thing about Loadstar, also today I discovered a bug in Loadstar while syncing the blobs, which sort of have, thanks to Teku guys, I have sort of figured out the fix for it. And but I mean, as such, Loadstar nodes went down because we basically wait for a gossip block to see in 32 slots, which we didn't see from my debugging at particular points, and then they just the nodes went down and they never came back up again, because then there were some issues that were fixed by Lighthouse guys, and their nodes were still up. So Loadstar was not able to sync from Lighthouse, and so these are some of the issues. But I think in the next run of DevNet 7 with the same spec, we should be more stable, and hopefully we can have Devnet 8 with the extended Devnet features.
Got it. Enrico, yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to add from CL side that most of the sync problems, as far as I know, was mostly caused by a rate limiting situation. So once we start removing rate limiting on Lighthouse and then also on the Teku side, things was better for the other clients to sync up. So I think it will be a CL discussion maybe next week to actually start putting some numbers and agree on some agreement on about the rate limit levels that we want to put.
Got it. Okay, so anything else on the DevNets? If not, then I guess, yeah, let's get DevNet 7 up with the same spec, and we can discuss this more as well on the 4844 call next Monday.
Do we have an expected ETA for 7 being up?
I think the ETA is once the Hive tests are green.
Good. All right, thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Danny, you wanted to give a quick note on the CL spec?
Hey, yeah. The DevNet 6 stuff might complicate this, but the intention right now is to release a CL spec tomorrow or Monday with the full feature build. So that's 4844, but also 4788, 7044, and 7045. Yes, Tim, it is nice that I can just say those numbers instead of trying to say the features. So you're right. So that's the intention. So we'll have full test vectors for all of those built, but those will not be the target for DevNet 7. So you would use the previous release for that, but hopefully it'll unblock some development on getting the full feature stuff developed. If we need to add more 4844 tests, or if something is broken and we have to change, make a breaking change, which I don't expect at this point, we might have to do some sort of like feature branch and special test vector build for pure 4844. That said, I think we're willing to take that risk and potential complexity so that we can get the full Deneb feature release out, because I know some people want to get development done, and we need to unblock that. Obviously, this is related to consensus layer folks generally. I know there's some of y'all here, so if you do have an issue with that, please let us know. And we will do the release. And then if there are issues on the call on Thursday, we can discuss them. But I think that this is the right path, given the things we're juggling. Any comment or question?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put in the announcements channel. We have a release and test vectors for the fully featured Deneb.
Awesome. Okay, and on a similar note, so last topic for today is the proposal of splitting out ERCs from EIPs in the repo. We've discussed this a fair bit for a long time, but Light Client has finally put up a PR which actually proposes or shows what it would look like technically. Yeah, and I guess just for background, like the main rationale here is like ERCs mostly focus on application layer standards, EIPs on protocol layer standards, and there might be value in having both processes be able to evolve separately. We have a bit more EIP editors now, so I think we have a bit more bandwidth to actually handle doing this split. And at least some of the current EIP editors would also stay on the ERC side as well. But this would allow for having two separate processes. So I'll pause here. I don't know, Mike, do you want to give some context on the specific PR? If not, if anyone has, if anyone has comments or
I guess I could just say quickly, I think the big question is how will we deal with numbering for these two things, and this is still open for debate a little bit, I guess. But ultimately, I think that the best plan is to sort of, whenever this migration happens, to have some sort of external document that EIP editors look at to see what the latest EIP number available is, and just assign that to the ERC and the EIPs. I know that we talked about maybe like making core EIPs like even numbers and ERCs odd numbers, but I think that given the number of historical EIPs we already have that don't abide by this, it's going to add some confusion. So that's like currently what the proposal in the PR is to do with the numbering. The rest of the information is pretty straightforward if you want to look at the proposal in the PR.
Got it. So I guess, I'd be curious to first hear, from the client teams, does anyone oppose this? And I know there's some folks on the EIP editor side who have concerns. So but maybe starting with client teams, and then we can go to EIP editors who are here.
I think I voiced my opinion on this a lot already. I think the EIP process should serve the core developers, and it's not right now. And one big issue with it is that we have an influx of so many ERCs that it's not really possible for someone to stay informed of all the EIPs that are coming up and have meaningful reviews on them. So I'm very strongly in favor of splitting the two repositories.
Got it. Anyone else?
This is Justin here. Same thing. Huge agreement. Just point of clarity, I'm assuming we're not intending on reusing any EIP numbers being recovered. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a comment by Nethermind as well in the chat. Daddy, we could argue next year about saving the numbers. And I guess, I don't know, from the CL side, does anyone have thoughts now that you've all started using this repo? Okay.
I'd agree with what Marius said, that just there's just so much going on with having both EIPs and ERCs. If we can reduce that at all, it's really helpful for people working on EIPs. So I definitely support this change and think it's really important to do.
Cool. Okay, so there are definitely some opposition on the EIP editor side. I don't know if there's anyone here who wants to share their thoughts or their view.
As a CL and EL dev, I'm in favor of the change, but as an EIP editor, I want to sort of figure out what is the harm that would come to the ERC process because of this, and would they be at any disadvantage? So those are the points that I think I would consider.
Got it.
Yeah, There's Greg Colvin here. I've been opposed to splitting the repos for years now, so I don't want to go into it right now. It's a premature decision. I'm really glad that Light Client put this up, but I think it was yesterday, so there'll be a lot more discussion. I'm very sensitive to the process having become too difficult for people to use. We do need to fix that, but just we're going to split the repo doesn't necessarily fix anything. And I think what we really need is to step back and get a lot more information and consensus from the people using it as to what are the pain points, what are the problems. If it's just, well, it's hard to follow a big repo, then the answer could be, well, the repo is really just a file cabinet that we're trying to keep organized. It's not the best place to follow things. A better place is the pages that the foundation maintains, organized. Everything's there by category if you want to just check there. There's an RSS feed. We need to get a mailing list feed, any other feeds that we can create that you can follow. Other pain points are that getting a draft in is a pain. We're very picayune on, link policies. Everything has to be spelled right, everything. I lose track. Are these rules too tight? What do we need to do to make it easier to get a draft into the system in the first place? And I'm sort of the only OG editor left. And from my point of view, the process has just gotten too rigid. It's no longer strong suggestions that the editors can exercise some judgment on. It's become a set of fixed rules that apparently are chafing people. So I just want to start top down, understand really what the problems are, and then we can get to whether this particular technical change actually answers the problems and helps to answer the problems. We don't start from, well, let's split the repos, create an ERC ghetto, and then things will be better. We don't know that that's the case. And we've been having this argument for so very long. But at this point, I'm still blocking consensus. So that was a long diatribe, and I could go on and on, but I already have in many places for a long time. So that's all.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. Victor?
I just want to. Yeah, this is Victor. Yeah, I'm very much agreeing with Greg. Maybe I'm one of the so-called EIP editors that he's referring to, but I really resonate more identify more as an author. How many of you in this group like the current EIP process? Raise your hand if you like it. And the next question would be, how many of you are supporting the split of ERC and EIP, anticipating that the process to submit core EIP would be easier? Raise your hand if you are supporting because you want to make it easier. There's not many, but that's out of my expectation. But how many are you supporting it because you want to make it trickier?
I don't know how possible it will be to get raise hands responses through this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So my argument is that it seems to me that the proposal, we're saying that once we split the repo, this problem will be solved for the core dev. And if you really look into the discussion between the editors and the proposer actually intended to do the split and keep the EIP, keep the core EIP submissions still hard while relaxing the process for ERC, which I'm in favor for ERC side, but I still think the core problems that we shouldn't make it so hard for people to contribute to EIP. I heard two pain from discussion with Marius. One is the noise from two sides. That's gonna happen now that we have more different type of core EIP as well. So why not split the core and consensus? Things like that. So we're trying to solve the problem instead of starting with splitting. And my last comment, if we really need to split, I think the impact on the ERC side would be that links to ERCs are all going to have to be broken. So if we are starting a new repo for the core, I think I will be more in favor rather than removing ERCs from this existing repo. So I'm curious, like how many would be in favor if the direction is to move core EIPs outside of this repo? That would be my question.
I am pretty opposed to that. I think there's a pretty strong understanding in the community that EIPs tend to refer to core protocol changes. If you look at, people talk about like EIP 4844 or EIP 1559, and obviously it's not like a perfect thing, but like generally when we say EIP, people understand like consensus changes to the Ethereum protocol. Whereas, and ERCs has a similar, I think, connotation to like the broader community of being like an application layer change. Like people know ERC20 or ERC1155 or whatnot. So regardless of like what happens on like the GitHub repo level, like you could, you can choose to move, the repo is already called EIPs, so that's why it probably makes sense to keep that for the core consensus stuff. But like, I feel pretty strongly that whatever is called EIP should refer to consensus changes to the protocol. Whatever is called ERCs is application level standards. And then, there's a couple categories like interface and whatnot that you sort of need to figure out. But at a high level, I think this is how the community understands it. And you want to maintain that to not confuse everybody about it.
Yeah. So, like we are going to with the split, we are going to break some URLs. But I think maintaining the core URLs is way more important than maintaining the ERCs. Anyway, one I wanted to respond to Greg because I think one thing that you touched upon was that the EIP process has become too rigid, and I kind of agree, and I think that's really the big pain point for a lot of core developers is that it's rigid. There are a lot of rules, and a lot of those rules I feel like were introduced by Micah at some point. And the intention behind it was that it wasn't possible for him or for the EIP editors back then. I think it was way smaller set than today, to really go through the EIPs, go through the incoming PRs, and have a really deep. Really go into depth and understand the changes and verify the changes on technical merit. And so they made up a lot of rules so that everything that it gets rid of a bunch of spam. And I think that is one of the core problems, is that you bunch in this very spammy side, the ERC side, where basically everyone that creates an application kind of thinks, okay, we have to do an ERC now, and opens a PR for the ERC, and these core EIPs where you have people we want to discuss, we want to like have the PRs open as like a discussion point so that we can maintain this open discussion more like a request for comments instead of like a set standard. And yeah, it's just two different things, and bunching them together was a bad decision. And so in order to make it easier for everyone, we should undo this decision. And also I think it seems like almost everyone is in favor of doing that. I agree that this PR that Matt opened might not be like the solution, but I think there's very strong agreement that this change needs to happen. And if, in my personal opinion, if one of the EAP editors or some of the EAP editors are against this change, then it's fine, and we have discussions about it. But at some point, and these discussions have been going on for a really long time, and so I think at some point we just need to make the decision to do this change, even if people object.
Justin,
I think.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm in total agreement with everything that Marius asked, and I would like to kind of call in to question. I see a lot of conflation of discussion of the editorial process and policy itself, which I think we can all pretty much agree is orthogonal to this decision. I don't think we should interpret advocating for a split as endorsement of a current perfect world of editorial process and EIP authorship process in general. So I think keeping those two separate in our mind leaves us many more options for solving this problem in a way that everyone's happy with.
yeah, and there's a comment by Victor around like asking the ERC community member. I think there's definitely been some like feedback in the past, but there's also part of me that feels like for years we've tried to find people from the ERC community to step up and steward this and be like maintainers or like own this process, and it sort of hasn't happened. And I think that splitting the EIPs out so that the people who like are focused on EIPs can just focus on that, and the community can organize around ERCs as well. It's probably a signal that like if they want to shape their process in a way that's better, like someone has to step up and do it. And it feels a bit weird that like because they're bundled together, then the people who want to do EIPs actually end up have to like doing all the ERC lifting, and it sort of like doesn't lead to anyone showing up and like making things better on the ERC side. So I think it's like if everyone, and it seems like all the client teams and most of the people who like write EIPs are in favor of splitting this, I don't think that like we necessarily need full buy-in from like everyone who's written an ERC. Like I think it's fine to say we're splitting this out. You can use this and you can add editors to the ERC side, but like the folks who like do most of the EIPs want a separate process, and we can move forward with that. And there's a couple ERC authors that are plus wanting the change in the chat. Sorry, I just cut someone off. Pooja, is that you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I'm not an ERC or EIP editor, but I'm someone who has been involved with the EIP process and helping out with improving the process, trying to identify the pain point. And as a part of Ethereum Cat Headers, we are working in this direction for past 3 years. So I would just like to make a few points. Here, from the conversation so far, the two biggest problems that we can hear out in support of the PR is the influx of PR that comes to the repository, and that kinds of create noise, for which many people who are interested in core EIPs cannot be able to follow that. I don't know if I have a perfect solution, but I was just wondering if RSS feed can help with them. Like, we have RSS feeds for status change and everything. Can we have an RSS feed for core EIPs only? I'm suggesting this just to maybe help out ERC proposals. What I have noticed in this period is like ERC proposals were in really bad shape about a couple of years ago. Thanks to Devnet, who has actively supported the education of the process and how to document it best. He had also contributed and did the EIP editors apprenticeship meeting for very long. I guess over a dozen of meetings we have organized, and it has supported a lot. We do have a dedicated ERC editor as of now, but we do not have many. Out of the 6 or 7 EIP editors, those are listed on EIP1, we do have only one ERC editor that is fully dedicated for ERC purposes. I still feel that there is a shortage of ERC editor, and I feel like that if we just move ERC out of that, probably that would be harmful for the team, for the ERC people. And the other biggest problem that I have identified during this conversation is about the external link, which I believe Sam Wilson has proposed this proposal 5757, and one by one we are trying to add permission to the external links. I do agree to Marius's point that there were a lot of strictness imposed by Micah and other editors at the time to make the process streamlined, to make the process even better, and we are reaching in that direction. I'm really requesting people to consider ERC as a part of Ethereum ecosystem, and we can, if we can, extend our support to these people. We should let them be there as well. Had there been proposal coming out of ERC team saying that we don't want to be a part of core EIP or the EIP system at all because we feel we are different, I think that would have been more in, I would have been more in favor of going towards the pull request. Having said that, yeah,
Sorry,
having said that,
just to that point, why should the ERC community have the say? Like, there are a bunch of people like now discussing this point that, like, if the ERC community wants to split out, then it would be fine. But basically now
I feel like they are.
The way I see it, the EIP community is trying to split the ERCs out, and so like. No, I think we should have the same say in this decision.
That is right. I do agree. I feel like they are intertwined and they should be considered together. I have a very good example for 4337. That is an ERC as of now, but we are working towards some proposal that we can eventually in future may be able to have it supported by the EVM and by the main protocol. So I find it hard to actually separate both of them, and I feel like going side by side if they are not creating much trouble to the core EIP process. I do agree that there are certain roadblockers for new authors who are trying to document process, and I feel like working in solving their issues after identifying what are the main problems, just like external link policy was one of those, I think we can come to a better place where we can live together.
So I guess I have like my thought on this is it's almost like a tooling question, right? Like you mentioned, and Greg sort of mentioned this as well, like, okay, if like too much stuff in one GitHub is like overwhelming, there's a bunch of other things we can do. Like, yes, we can do RSS, we can do like the pages on eeps.ethereum at large. But then the alternative is like if GitHub notifications is the tool that all the core devs use, then that's the thing we should use, right? Like we shouldn't, like the single complaint everyone has is there's too much friction in this. And if like all the client devs are saying, I want to watch a repo that has like less issues in it and that the issues in it are more relevant, then we should optimize for that. I also think like at the end of the day, this is just like a repo and URL split. Like the idea that, because they're in two different repos, like, I don't know, someone working on account abstraction can't pay attention to like EEPs or Ethereum/EEPs and Ethereum/ERCs seems a bit weird, given that like today to, contribute to Ethereum, we literally had a presentation earlier about like a new testing repo. We have the engine API repo. We have the EL specs, the CL specs, the EIPs. Like people in practice already follow, like nearly like 10 repos if they want to follow everything. So I don't know why splitting the repo and splitting the URLs is such a big, it doesn't seem like a big change in terms of process. It doesn't seem like it adds a ton of friction in terms of like, if you want to write an ERC and write an EIP, it's not that different than if you want to write an EIP today and have your spec live in the CL specs repo. And people do that and it seems to work. So I'm like much more inclined to just, that splitting the repos doesn't like sever the process and like mean that no one can ever contribute from one to the other. It just gives like more clarity, the same way that we have, a repo for testing and a repo for like the specs. Yeah, it just keeps things more encapsulated, but it doesn't seem like a huge deal to have two repos rather than one. Yeah, Justin?
So to sharpen that point a little bit, the repo is actually, I think, the correct thing to collect this in and make that distinction on, because the editorial process itself actually manifests itself in a lot of automated ways, and there's a lot of tooling and hooks and things like that that contribute to the processes that we want to refine. So I actually think that's actually saying that there's a more of an advantage in going further with this and actually separating them out to allow people to automate the process however they see fit. So I think I was kind of on the page like, well, mono repo, multiple repos, who really cares? At the end of the day, there's folders that you look at, and I don't think that's quite correct. I think you're leaving a lot of automation potential on the table by not embracing the separate repo.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, if we do customize things more, than having separate repos obviously makes it much easier. And I think, yeah, I also agree with the point around like ERCs generally. Like it doesn't seem reasonable to like halt like protocol development based on like application layer concerns as a general principle. Like haven't really done this in the past. Ethereum protocol changes are already like extremely slow relative to software development in general. So any like external source of friction tends to be just a bad idea. So I don't know. It seems to me like all of the client teams are in favor of this. Some of the folks here who have been ERC authors as well are in favor of this. There's a couple people on the EIP editor sides who are not in favor. But I don't know, it seems to me like the balance is like we should go ahead and do this change. We've been talking about it for years. It's also something that we can undo, that's not incredibly hard to undo if we realize in a year that it was the wrong thing. But yeah, I think if all of the client teams are in favor, if parts of the EIP editors are in favor, yeah, we should go for it. Greg? Oh, we can't hear you, Greg. You're still on mute.
I nonetheless still block consensus. I very much hear you. There's a problem. I'm not convinced that simply splitting the repos helps. And we really are one community trying to improve Ethereum. This line is not so strong, and the problems do not seem to me to be with the tooling. I disagree that it is the core devs repo. I really do. When the editors formed as a group, we were a distinct group. And really, if the core devs found what we were doing useful, great. If not, we're sorry. But it's not, I'm not rejecting you. I'm just saying the editors have their own integrity, and the repo in the end is our file cabinet. It needs to serve our work, and not necessarily the core dev's ability to follow the work. GitHub repos are not really good for that. And we need and can provide other ways to notify. RSS feeds are old-fashioned. I don't know, technically, can we feed notifications into Discord, for instance? That's a question.
So I guess on your point around blocking this, there's a comment in the chat. I don't think a single person can block this. I think,
Yes, I can. I'm an editor, and I can block consensus with the editors. They can decide what to do about it.
Well, sure, but another editor can merge the PR, right? So I don't know that we need unanimous consent. I don't think we've required unanimous consent for any change ever.
I'm saying it's a consensus change of the editors. I'm blocking consensus. We editors can decide what to do. I might be convinced, but I'd much rather see, and I've said, a complete plan from the top down that we've really looked at what the problem is, what are the pain points, and know that we're going to solve it. And then if splitting the repos as just saying, oh, 2 file cabinets will work better than one, and we've worked out the problems and how to fix them. Numbering is more of a problem than it might seem, for instance. Then if splitting the repos looks like the way to go, then that's the way to go. But we could split the repos and solve none of the problems.
Yeah, but I think we've agreed to this, and I think all of the client teams still want to go ahead with it. And Dano has a comment like consensus doesn't imply unanimity, and I think we're at a point where we have extremely strong consensus on most of the people who write core EIPs and engage with that process.
Okay. What can I say? The editors are an independent group. We'll discuss this as a group, and
so we have discussed this for years, though, and this is kind of the thing. And I guess back to Jamie's comment is, I've personally discussed this since probably 2019, on and off through this, and so I think with the addition of having all the CL folks using this process, having had years of discussion that hasn't, done much in terms of moving the conversation forward. I don't know. I don't know that we learn much more by discussing things for another, 6 months. I think we will learn a lot by actually splitting and running the experiment. If it's a bad idea, then worst case, we just revert it back and it's not the end of the world. But
I'm still not the only problem that splitting the repos actually solves is that if somebody is using GitHub notifications to follow things or browsing the repo for following things, it will help the core devs doing that. I don't know how many core devs try to follow it that way. There's other ways to follow it.
But they do. We literally have everything else on GitHub. All the conversations happen there. We have core devs following, a bunch of different repos from research to testing to specs. And so it's sure, you can say use an RSS feed, but it doesn't make
the way to go.
Or whatever else. But it's we can just use the same tool. And again, this is just a GitHub repo and a URL. it does lead, the processes can evolve differently, but if, if it's true that like the processes are optimal as they are today and they don't change in the future, then the worst we've done is we've created an extra repo for people to, follow and, duplicated a bunch of automation, which is, pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. And then everything else is the same. But in practice, if we do this change and then things do start to change from one repo to the other, then it's a sign it was a good idea to do it. And I don't think it's like discussing the issue for another 6 months on like the EIP IP calls that'll give us more information at this point. It's like actually trying it, seeing other things we can do, and going from there. So I don't know. I feel like I've had this conversation with many people over the past few years, and it always sort of ends up at the same spot where the vast majority of people want this to happen. They're a bit disengaged from the current process because they feel burnt out by it. And then you have a couple of people who are like very engaged with the process who sort of want more information when there's just like this general, I don't know, like discontent that's shared. And I think, like a bigger step forward of actually splitting it out and trying the separate repos is probably the best path forward at this point.
I believe the best thing is the earlier thing, which is we make it very easy for drafts to get in.
But we can do that. Sure, we can do that in both repos then. That's not the end of the world.
We can do it now.
But it hasn't happened. That's the thing. We could have done it in 2020.
We've been talking about this. Exactly. We've been talking about all of these things to change about the EIP process, but it just doesn't happen. And eventually we just have to do something because the process isn't serving. The process isn't serving any of the people it's meant to serve. It doesn't serve ERC authors. It doesn't serve core developers. It doesn't serve EIP editors. This is something that I think is going to alleviate the deadlock that we have in making decisions and changing the process, and let the people who are really involved with their specific parts of the process develop it in a way that they see fit.
And I think, look, we're already over time. Yeah. I think what I would suggest is like, it's clear to me at least that from the core EIP side, like there's strong consensus to split this out. And there's an EIP IP call next Wednesday, I believe. So what I would suggest is that we spend that call talking about the how rather than like the if. Like, Matt's PR has some, issues with it. There's a couple of issues that came up today, but I think, having a conversation about how do we want to go about this is probably the right next step in like EIP IP, given the strong support here. And I guess also if people feel very strong, like if the ERC community feels very strongly that this is like a terrible idea and like we shouldn't do it, then they should probably voice that in the next couple of days before like that EIP IP call. And we can discuss it then, but otherwise it seems like from the core side, we have like pretty strong consensus to split things. The EIP IP call is Wednesday, 14 UTC. The agenda, I don't know if someone can post a link to the agenda in the chat here, but it's in the cat herders repo. Okay, I know we're already a bit over time. Was there anything else people wanted to discuss? Okay, well, thanks everyone. Talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.